Good to see everybody again. I have a question for you this week. Do you ever feel like you don't measure up in life? Do you ever feel like you're just not quite getting it done well enough? You're frustrated, you're disappointed, because you're not meeting the expectations that you want to, or meeting the expectations of others around you. I ask this question because in Amos chapter 7, our scripture reading for this week, God tells the Israelites they are not measuring up. He uses the analogy of a plumb line that was used to measure the straightness of walls to tell the Israelites that they are not straight, that they are not measuring up. Elsewhere in Scripture, in both Deuteronomy and Philippians, we're told that we live in a crooked and warped generation. If we're human, we sometimes have the feeling that we're not measuring up. Like the Israelites, God looks at us and knows that we are not obeying Him. And it can be hard at times in life when we're not obeying God. It can be hard to have the pressure of knowing that we're not meeting God's expectations or not measuring up to His standard. Yet in the book of Amos, God says an interesting thing. While He is clearly scolding the Israelites for not measuring up, He, in the same breath, says that the Israelites are still His people. God tells Amos that Israel are my people. And God says the same thing in Philippians of us. He calls us children of God, despite the fact that we are in this crooked and warped generation, not measuring up. You see, that's the whole thing. Despite our frailty, despite the fact that, quite frankly, we never measure up to God, we are still His children. We are still His people. Romans chapter 5 gets very specific when St. Paul says, while we were still powerless, Christ came to save us. While we were still sinners, not measuring up, that's when the salvation of Jesus came. And that's the promise that God had for the Israelites. And that's the promise that God has for you and me in times in our lives when we're just not measuring up. That we don't have to. Because Christ died for us so that at times when we fail, so that at times when we are warped and crooked, we may be forgiven. Because we are God's people. See you next time.